Good morning, everyone. Atheists, agnostics, skeptics, freethinkers, and everyone else is welcome here. At Seattle Atheist Church, we call ourselves an atheist church because we are atheists. So, I want to talk to you today about the holiday season, which is upon us, and how can we have the best holiday possible. So the first thing I'd like to talk about is the fact that as an atheist at holiday gatherings, you will probably be usually in the minority, right? And I had a family member say to me that even if he were on a deserted island, eventually he would invent religion because it would just be so obvious to him. Some atheists say, well, without religion, everyone is an atheist, right? Like unless you're indoctrinated with religion. But this person's belief was he would come upon religion by himself. And so I want to talk about something that we've talked about before, but I want to touch on it because I think it's a really important thing to remember. If you're somewhere where everyone else is not an atheist and you're feeling kind of like an outsider, the question is, how is it that people come to believe in all this, the myth that they've come to believe in? And so somewhere along our evolutionary path, we evolved the ability to think about other minds. So to think about what other people might be thinking about. And so you can see how this is beneficial from an evolutionary point of view. But the idea that we then have this idea that there is some mind out there which can think about us, or that we need to think about, I call this mind out there Mott. And so this holiday season, a lot of people are very concerned about Mott, what Mott is thinking, what they're thinking about Mott. And I think that just having the freedom to realize where this comes from can free us up. Speaking personally, the more comfortable I've become with my own atheism, the more comfortable other people have become with my own atheism. So I'd like to say the first step to having a conscious holiday as an atheist is to embrace the word atheist. And the more comfortable you become with it, perhaps the more comfortable some of your family member will become with it as well. So we are in fact meaning-making machines, and that means that we get to make stuff up. Some of it is positive, some of it is negative, and the first step to being really conscious during the holiday season is to check in with yourself about what am I making up about this situation? So we make up positive stuff, and most of my talk will be about that, but I want to start by talking about some of the negative stuff that we make up. So we've all seen the television commercials and the movies and everything which celebrate just 2 or 3 people getting together to have a great holiday experience together. What? You haven't seen that? It's usually pictures of a whole crowd of people streaming through the front door, giving hugs and carrying packages, or big families sitting around the table. And so I think that one thing that can happen is if you find yourself celebrating Christmas with just 2 or 3 people, or Thanksgiving or whatever, or just by yourself, that you might make up a story that somehow you're left out of what everyone else is participating in. And so that a holiday is supposed to have a lot of people in order for it to be a significant celebration. And depending on who you are, you might even have specific requirements for who you'd prefer to be spending that holiday time with. So it hurts to say that at holiday time, there are a lot of people who get lonely. So the first thing we can do is, if we're not lonely, try to remember that other people might be lonely and try to reach out and to be as kind and welcoming to others as we can. But if it is something that's happening to us personally, remember that, it's okay, it doesn't help that it's also cold and rainy at this time of year. So if you're sorrowful in the summer, you can take a nice walk in the sunshine, and that helps most of us feel better. But this time of year, if you're sad and then your hands are also cold and it's gray outside, it can feel really oppressive. So my first advice is, might seem trivial, but I don't think it is to get warm. Put on your fleece, put on 2 pairs of socks, wrap up in a blanket, get your hot cocoa, and at least you'll be warm. Warm and sad is much better than cold and sad. So I read a quote on a forum when I was researching for this talk, and it said, "I'm so lonely that I feel like there is no reflection when I look in the mirror." And that's how holidays can make some people feel. So I can't celebrate this thing by myself. And the advice I have for anyone who's feeling lonely like that is to share your loneliness with another person. So we have a fear that being lonely and then being with someone else is even more tragic because it's lonely and it's awkward. Except for that it isn't. It's like a thing we often fear, but actually having coffee with a friend, even if it's a little strange, it's better. So I recommend if you feel lonely, get yourself out there. And notice that if you don't even have anyone to share coffee with, that you can acknowledge that this is a temporary condition in your life. Like, in 2016, I'm really going to prioritize creating more connection in my life. So I want to talk a little bit about how to do that. So you have, and this is partly, I saw a talk by Shasta Nelson, and she does work on friendships and stuff if anybody's interested in learning more. So you have different circles of friends. And it's nice to know people who you consider a friend in a particular context. But those friendships that are highly dependent on context, especially if you're like over the age of 30, so you've kind of learned this lesson, you have realized that context-specific friendships can be especially fragile. If you lose a context, you're at risk of losing the friend. For example, this time of year, I often think about Josh, who was here, who was a very special part of our church, one of the founding members of our church. And I wonder, when will we see Josh again? And that can make me feel sad sometimes, but I'm hoping that we have enough of a connection that we haven't kind of lost Josh to the ether. But think about the fact that you have friends in different contexts, and if you really would like that person to be a friend, it's important to try to interact with them in multiple contexts. So invite them out for a drink, or at least go out on our Saturdays for our secular Sundays. If you can, have people over to your home. And if you're very lucky, you might get a chance to visit them in their home. And that's one of the ways to deepen friendships. All of that requires a certain amount of putting yourself out there. And it doesn't happen overnight. So if today you feel lonely, it's okay. Make a little note to yourself, in 2016, I'm going to make an effort to have more connection. Okay, the next big expectation that people have around holidays is all the material stuff. If you just start listing the stuff required to do Christmas the way a consumer culture says you're supposed to do it, the tree, the ornaments, the turkey, the sides, the new clothes, the gifts, and maybe even travel, that can feel really overwhelming if you're somebody who doesn't have the financial resources to kind of do all of that. So here's a possibility. Maybe you just say no to all that. There is actually a movement called Buy Nothing Christmas. And even people who have a lot of money sometimes choose the Buy Nothing Christmas because they want to make sure that Christmas becomes an opportunity to focus on other things that matter more to them. Some women, it's like they do this with their weddings, they do this with Christmas, they can get crazy setting up expectations to have the perfect whatever and then doing lots of stuff that, guess what, you really don't have to do. So you can choose to spend very little, and that can actually be a very modern and inspiring choice. So mostly you have to do the mental work to acknowledge whatever it is about the holiday that is making you unhappy, and then make some new decisions. So if you think you have to spend a lot of money to celebrate and that doesn't work for you, you can make some new decisions. Be brave about it. Atheists are nothing if not brave. So how do I suggest you celebrate? First, Do your own thing. And don't worry about if it's good enough for anyone else. You should be used to that as an atheist. Yes, and it makes you want to sing, doesn't it? Isn't there? There's do your thing. Is that what you're singing, or are you singing?
It's not good if it's not good enough.
For anyone else, just sing. Yes. So when you're comfortable with yourself, you give other people permission to be honest and comfortable with themselves. So here's an idea for some atheists. Thanksgiving and Christmas. I left out Hanukkah mostly because my Jewish friends told me that Hanukkah is not their big thing anyway. But whatever. Don't let somebody tell you that you can't. Because atheists were celebrating Christmas before Christians were. We have a whole talk on that though, so I'm not going in that direction. But just know that as you enjoy your beautiful red Starbucks cup, atheists are taking Christmas back. Atheist Dr. Joe Ray says, put the soul in solstice. What does that even mean? No. But you people in this church have heard me talk about social and environmental justice and the vegan food movement, so I took it in that direction. There is a chef named Bryant Terry, who's he cooks soul food, vegan soul food. And I have decided to make a life-affirming statement in just 5 dishes. And it is a soulful menu of Creole spiced tempeh over citrus collard greens, a side of cornbread, and ending the meal with a choice of pumpkin pie and chocolate pecan tarts. So what I'm showing there is actually, you can even be creative about what you serve at Christmas, right? Or Thanksgiving or whatever. So now, this leads me into a little bit of what we talked about last week after the talk, where we talked about being conscious of the fact that there are people who have less than we do, or in a more difficult situation than we are. So there are people who don't have nutritious food. So one thing we could do is we could buy some nutritious groceries to share. But the Bryant Terry local food community gardens movement, all of that goes much, much deeper. We can advocate for community gardens. We can advocate to change the nation's food policies, where we're feeding people, not cows. That's the end of my 2-minute food justice rant there. Okay, but let's talk about symbols of the holiday. So free thinkers actually have what they call the tree of knowledge. So instead of having a, what tree, you can have a tree of knowledge tree. And for some of the free thinkers, they actually decorate it with ornaments of books. And the first few times I saw that, I thought, okay. But, now the idea's kind of going on it, maybe it's cool. So question, it would stimulate a really interesting conversation. What, did you read a book that rocked your world this year? And then if every year you made a little ornament that kind of looks like the cover of that book, it would be a way to kind of keep that knowledge as part of the discussion every year. And so if I were going to do that this year, maybe the book that I read this year that I think is going to have the biggest impact for me is the book Crucial Conversations. So there's nothing wrong with having a tree and covering it, frankly, with anything that you desire. It is a freaking pagan symbol, okay? So while you're decorating your tree, you might play Christmas songs and eat your Christmas cookies. And if you choose not to buy a tree, there's a $5 decal of a tree that's like a big decal available on Amazon. And you could sit there and look at old photographs and listen to secular Christmas music and realize that anything you do at Christmas or Thanksgiving, do it for a couple of years in a row, it's become a tradition, right? So Greta Christina has a list of songs for Christmas that she recommends, and I noticed that most of them have something to do with bells. So bells could become an atheist symbol. Hang some bells on your door along with some mistletoe. And here, hell's bells, somebody just said. So her songs that she recommends are Sleigh Ride, Winter Wonderland, jingle bells, silver bells, and carol of the bells, right? So you know you're at an atheist holiday party where there's lots of bells ringing and singing about bells. All right, don't be afraid of Santa Claus. So I actually, when I first sat down, I was going to go negative on Santa Claus. And, you know, Santa doesn't come for all the children, all of that kind of, especially after last week's talk, I was like looking for the social justice aspect of Santa Claus. But I realized that actually, whether or not Santa comes for all the children is really up to us. So, participate in toy drives so that all the children of the world have a chance to have a Santa Claus Christmas. Now, in case you didn't know it, there is in fact a black Santa and a Hispanic Santa. And the black Santa sometimes is called Soul Santa. And I started reading about various people, often black ministers who have played Santa Claus. And they say, here guy says, I thought it would be appropriate to have Soul Santa come to the party. Kids need to see symbols that look like them. And kids are gleeful to see a black Santa Claus. And somebody else from Catholic Charities, which offers Hispanic Santa throughout the Southwest, says it's probably good for everyone to see Santa in their own nationality. So, why does Santa's skin color matter? Because race matters, and kids as young as 3 do notice. And although that might seem frivolous, Santa is a very big deal to kids. And the final one is a mother of one of my colleagues who grew up in Detroit and is black, only took her to see Black Santa. She wanted her to see all the fun stuff of Christmas coming from a person who looked like the people she knew. Okay, so we've got Black Santa, we've got Hispanic Santa. At Seattle Atheist Church, I believe we have a blue bearded Santa promised to us. At least I hope so. And that's representative for us of freedom and fun. So let's talk about the holiday season. And I want to close the way I always do, which is atheists believe in good because good works in non-mysterious ways. Thank you.